Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As you can see, I got my new differential in. Those that watched my previous video know that I exploded my original 331 gear 12 bolt, and rather than doing a rebuild of that, I decided just to go ahead and get a brand new built rear end from Moser. As you can see, it is a 12 bolt. Why I didn't go with a 9-inch, even though it was recommended to me, is because the 12 bolt's a little bit lighter and a little bit more efficient, so I think that's going to be beneficial to me. Plus, I think no matter whether I had a 9-inch or a 12 bolt, I'm still going to need to soften up my launch because it's just too much of a shock with the twin disc RXT clutch and the drag radials. So, just something that I had to keep in mind. Didn't come without problems. First, this did not come powder coated, which was a drag because the whole center section had to be disassembled, powder coated, then reassembled. But it did offer an opportunity to get like my tabs for my brakes and all that stuff on there before powder coating. Also, I did ask for the adjustable lower control arm brackets, and they didn't come with them. But I guess that's another good thing because the Global West lower control arm brackets I'm going to show you here in a minute will not fit these. So, or will not fit the adjustable ones. They only fit this style right here. So, with that, I can now go ahead and gearing. So inside, let me just tell you some of the features, I guess. First, I got this thing 60 inches long rather than 61 inches. That's stock to a 71. That's so if I do a mini tub like I would eventually like to, then I can actually bring the tires in a little bit. So 60 inches. It's got a 1350 yoke on it, which my other one did anyways, but that's always important. I always recommend 1350 yokes just for strength. It's got 391 gears, the Lightning series, because they come from US Gear. Beautiful looking piece, really shiny. Again, a little bit more efficient, might be slightly stronger. Definitely supposed to be reduced noise and reduced temperatures, which is important for me since I road race it. So a few things I obviously have to do for assembly is get my brake lines on, put in the bushings, and get it in the car, and then I can start assembling the rest of it, like the axles and the brakes. Moving over to the Moser 12 bolt rear end, I no longer can use my custom-made weight jack system, which bolted to the stock 12 bolt rear end. And that allowed me to adjust the ride heights on left and right side at the rear end. And because I still want the ability to adjust the ride height and maybe even adjust corner weights in the future, I went with coilovers. Very expensive to go to, but I think there's going to be some benefits in the long run. Unfortunately, I couldn't just buy a single kit. I had to kind of piece it together. So I went with UMI. They are the ones that supplied the shocks or the coilover, which, as you can see, is a Viking product. I highly recommend Viking. One of the best, if not the best, bang for the bucks. Double adjustable. I think there's 19 adjustments on compression and 19 on the rebound. I went with I think it's the Warriors, the base version, not the exotic, the fancier Crusader series. I might have that backwards, but in any case, I went with the more base version. This is a C215 shock body because it's important that you measure, from bearing to bearing to see what it'll be at ride height so you can get the right length. And mine was actually quite long, much longer than I expected. So that's what I went with. Also, make sure you get the right width of bearing on the bottoms because they offer a 1-inch and a 1-inch and a quarter. Mine I went with is 1-inch based upon the bracket right here, that width right there. Spring rate, it's a 14-inch spring, 150 pounds. I was running a 175 pounds conventional spring before. I really liked it. I'm hoping this isn't actually too light because one thing to note is spring rates are measured when they're at 90 degrees. You start putting this on an angle and that spring rate goes down. So 150 pounds, maybe 135 pounds, so something to keep in mind. But also the fact that these are now mounted on the back side of the axle, that also makes a difference as well. So just little things to keep in mind. I also picked up these roller bearings. They go between the spring and the adjuster nut. That just makes it a little easier to spin once I have weight on the vehicle. Also, the spherical bearings. So on the top I'm running a T-bar with a spherical bearing here, and on the bottom just an I bearing, spherical bearing, whatever on the bottom. What's nice is these are just held in by C-clips, so you do need to have, not C-clips, yes, C-clips. You just need to have a C-clip tool to install these. But what's nice is that, say you changed it to both T-bar or both I-bearings or whatever, you can just swap out the bearing or the bushing, and you don't have to get a whole new shock body because, like I said, very expensive. Now, like I said, I had to piece this together. This part right here, which is the bracket that goes on the control arm or on the axle itself, this is from Global West. I went with Global West because they're the only ones that make a bracket that fits the Moser, rear end. You can get all kinds that fit the stock ones, but not many out there that do the Moser. So also be aware, these do not fit the adjustable lower control arm brackets. If you get that ordered from Moser, they won't fit that. These only fit the stock 68 to 72 brackets, or I guess 64 to 72 brackets. But it seems like a pretty nice piece, powder coated and whatnot, but that's how I can connect to the axle housing itself. The last piece of this coilover kit is this Crossbrace, which I again got from UMI Performance, and I think this is a very important piece because it will distribute the weight load from the shock towers from left to right, because as you know, or as you should know, the stock shock location was never designed to hold the weight of the vehicle, not especially when you're talking about road race and all that stuff. That's a lot of pressure to go through that. So this needs to be on there, in my opinion. Global West makes a really good version as well. It bolts to the frame, perhaps even a more sturdy and robust system. But I went with the UMI because I was having clearance problems with my exhaust and my fuel lines and whatnot. So I had to go with a very low profile design, and this is the one that would work for me. Unfortunately, it didn't come without problems. So as you can see, these are the bolt holes that go through where the stock bolts for your shocks would go. And this side, you can see, is adjustable, right? They give a little bit of adjustment. However, the distance between my shock towers, or the shock bolt holes, is 31 1/8 of an inch. The distance between here, the center of that, to the farthest point right here is less than 31 inches. So if you guys have or want to use this bar and your shocks, the bolt hole to bolt hole is 31 inches or more, you're likely going to have the same kind of problem I'm going to have, or I am having, and it's just not going to fit without some sort of modification. Now, modifying, aftermarket product is not super uncommon. It's actually probably more common than not. However, as you can see, they do not give you much material here to do any kind of modification. So that is not tickling my bone anywhere in a good way. So, but that's not to knock UMI Performance. As you can see, their welds are exceptional. The idea is good, but I feel that the product is built too small. I did call them. They say this is built within spec. I gave them all the measurements. I did do a measurement on another chassis because they were suggesting that perhaps my frame was wrong and bent. Well, I went over to a 68 Chevelle and found that one to be 31 1/4. So it was even wider than mine. So there'd be no chance this would ever fit. And I also went online and looked at some measurements. Now there's no exact measurement for those holes exactly, but there is a hole directly in front. So say this is your hole directly in front, and that measurement would be 31 inches side to side. So I'm using that as what GM would suggest is their factory reference length. So I feel that this is potentially built too small, but I mean, they're claiming they sell thousands of these and not having a problem. But I can only say in my example that doesn't fit. And well, the 100% of my tests and my research show that this is too short. But hey, that's all I can do, is I've only got 2 examples. So if anybody else has this product, let me know if it fit for you guys. Anybody is going to buy this product, which I'd still say is, maybe your only choice if you can't build one yourself, just do a measurement between your shock bolts and make sure that they are under 31 inches. So I got to get this modified and installed, and then I can install the rear end itself. So I'm working on the Global West lower control arm brackets for the coilovers, as I need to drill this hole right here into the housing, because that's what actually supports the bracket onto the housing. And I wanted to show you the gaps, the tolerances that are present on not only the bracket but the housing itself. Now ignore the weights that I have here. That's just to balance out the diff itself, because there is an axle on the other side. But let me go over to here and see if I can squeak in. Okay, so right there, that's the gap between the lower control arm and the Moser brackets. That is about 3/16 to an 1/8 of an inch, an 1/8 to a 3/16, which is quite a bit, considering with that amount of play, when I can move that lower control arm, so that's not so good. Then I can show you this right here. That is about an 1/8 of an inch of a gap right there. You can move this up like that, but you can see the piss poor angle that would create, and I don't like that, so I like that this is now square in this position. And then if I go all the way over to here, and zoom in here. Okay, there's another 1/8 to 3/16 of a gap from that. Now, when you call Global West, they say it's because the Moser brackets, there's differences in tolerances between this bracket right here. Okay, I get it. But because this is a modular design, or at least it looks that way, I don't know why they didn't just make this a little bit narrower in this area, and then I could fill that gap right in here, right? I could put washers in this little space right there. Instead, I can't make this any shorter, so now I have to shim it. So now Global West will say that you can just torque them in, and these braces on the sides and also here will bend in. I don't like that, so I'm going to use some body mount spacers right here, some washers, and I'm going to put, these are a 1/16 of an inch each, so I'll put about one on each side. No, I'm going to put 2 on this side because I want this to be as close or as tight from this direction here, because I want as much clearance around these bolts as I can. I'm going to put one of these washers, which is an 1/8 of an inch thick. I'm going to put that in right there. That'll clear that up, and I'll probably use another one of these between the in here for the lower control arm. So when I torque it all together, it's not going to bend the metal all that much, because if you ask me, bending the metal upwards of 3/16 of an inch is not that good. So if you get any of these kind of brackets, just be aware that's going to be the case. So I'm not trying to say that it's bad, design or bad craftsmanship. It's just one of these things that, well, it is what it is. My recommendation is, if you have any kind of fabrication skills and a good welder, I would totally be building my own bracket. But it is what it is. So let's move along with what we got. So as you can see, I have redid the brake lines and there is now plenty of clearance around the coilover spring. So now I can go ahead and finish the assembly. So as you can see, I went with the plain face 11-inch rotor rather than the cross-drilled. The reason for that is because I do occasionally road race my car, and under extreme temperatures, the cross-drilled rotors have a tendency to crack. That might not be so much the case on the rear brakes because they don't see the same kind of temps as the fronts, but with the small amount of surface area here, there's not a lot of heat dissipation, so I just don't want to risk that. I don't see any kind of performance difference between the two. The cross-drilled ones might have a very minute amount of cooling benefit, and the grooves would have a little bit of, bite onto the pad, but definitely nothing noticeable. In terms of looks and aesthetics, which is really what cross-drilled rotors are for, then absolutely go that way. They do look better. But for my application, this is going to be fine for me, plus they're a little bit cheaper. One thing that's critical is your center alignment of your caliper to your rotor. Now if you look down from this angle right here, you'll be able to see how off-center it is. And then you use these little shims that come with the kit, and it will bring in your caliper that way until it's centered, to be as perfect as you can get it. You want it to be as close as you can to ensure proper or even pad wear. Now that we have the caliper aligned, I can now put in my brake pad. So we just got to pop out this little retainer screw, do the clip. Now I am using a BP20 pad, which is a very expensive upgrade, surprisingly. But the reason for that is because this operates at a slightly higher temperature. Again, I do some road racing. Plus, brake pads can make a night and day difference in your braking performance. So if you ever feel that your brakes don't work that well, just go to a more aggressive pad. It's enormously different. So BP20 pads for me. So we have this all assembled now. When you're installing the caliper for the final time, make sure you throw a little Loctite on there. They say red Loctite, but I always just use blue. It never seems to be a problem for me. For the flex line that goes to the caliper, just make sure that it's routed in a way that it doesn't have any kind of contact with obviously the rotor or the wheel. So I have the car resting at ride height on the blocks, and I set the ride height. You can kind of see what I got going on. If we go under the car, You can see the differential is, tucked in there, well, just like the old one was. The coilovers, yeah, I'll give you kind of a shot of what it looks like. They tuck up there pretty nicely. There's really no clearance problems, which is good. However, there is a clearance problem right here. I wouldn't say really a problem, but it is tight. And that's right around the tire, not just the rim. And the tires can flex, so I don't really like that. I think that's a bit of a poor design. Fine if you guys are running 18-inch wheels, or for those that run 18s, but not for those running 15s. So I don't really like that. But from now on, I got to put on the rear sway bar. I have to get some parking brake cables, and I'm waiting for the drive shaft now, which I've measured for. So that's off to Denny's, and hopefully that comes sooner than later. And if you guys want to see how the differential performs with the new 391 gears, hit the like button, subscribe if you can, and thanks for watching.